Hey, friends of the paradise. Kids, I'm ready to read a couple more books to you today. It is Words Wednesday. All right, so if you're following along with our YouTube channel, you know that we have the wonderful Mr. Larry Gavin, who is a poet and has been reading his poetry on our site. And we have, if you look in our playlist, we actually have some very wonderful musicians who have put some of their music on there for us to enjoy. And of course, we have me reading books. So let's start today with this first book. It's called Piggybook, and it was written and illustrated by Anthony Browne. You can see that. Okay. Now, just so that we can kind of remember, so everybody knows this, that all of the books that I read to you were actually the books that my boys had when they were little. So some of them I've read many, many times, and this was one of them. I'm going to turn to the side so y'all can see. Mr. Pigott lived with his two sons, Simon and Patrick, in a nice house with a nice garden and a nice car in the nice garage. Inside of the house was his wife. "Hurry up with the breakfast, dear," he called every morning before he went off to his very important job. "Hurry up with the breakfast, Mom," Simon and Patrick yelled before they went off to their very important school. After they left the house, Mrs. Pigott washed all of the breakfast things, made all of the beds, vacuumed all of the carpets, and then went to work. "Hurry up with the meal, Mom," the boys called every evening when they came home from their very important school. "Hurry up with the meal, old girl," Mr. Pigott called every evening when he came home from his very important job. As soon as they had eaten, Mrs. Pigott washed the dishes, washed the clothes, did the ironing, and then cooked some more. What are these guys doing? They're just resting. This is a TV. Back in the olden days, TVs used to sit on the floor. One evening, when the boys got home from school, there was no one to greet them. "Where's Mom?" demanded Mr. Pigott when he got home from work. She was nowhere to be found. On the mantelpiece was an envelope. Mr. Pigott opened it. Inside was a piece of paper. Look what happened to Mr. Pigott's hand. Whoops. The note said, "You are pigs." "But what shall we do?" said Mr. Pigott. They had to make their own meal. It took hours and it was horrible. The next morning, they had to make their own breakfast. It took hours, and it was horrible. The next day, and the next night, and the day after that, Mrs. Pigott was still not there. Mr. Pigott, Simon, and Patrick learned to take care of themselves. But they never washed the dishes, and they never washed their clothes. And soon, the house was like a pigsty. "When is Mom coming home?" the boys squealed after another horrible meal. "How should I know?" Mr. Pigott grunted. And they all became more and more grumpy. And what did they look like? Pigs. One night, there was nothing in the house for them to cook. "We'll just have to root around and find some scraps," snorted Mr. Pigott. And just then, Mrs. Pigott walked in. Look at her. "Please come back," they snuffled. So Mrs. Pigott stayed, and Mr. Pigott washed the dishes. Patrick and Simon made the beds. Mr. Pigott did the ironing. And they all helped with the cooking, and sometimes they even sort of liked it. And Mom was happy too, because she fixed the car. That's a really good book about what we do in our houses to help take care of each other. And there's not one job that's a mom job and one job that's a dad job or one job that's a kid job. I think all the jobs are kid jobs. That was just a joke. All right, the next book is called Apartment 3, and it's by Ezra Jack Keats. This is also a very old book. As a matter of fact, this book was first published in 1971. Even Miss Heidi was a little kid then, hard to believe. I'll try to show you these pictures really well. The rain fell steadily. It beat against the windows, softening the sounds of the city. As Sam gazed out, he heard someone in the building playing a harmonica. It filled him with sad and lonely feelings, like the rain outside. He'd heard that music before, and every time it was different. Who's that playing, Sam wondered. Sam went to the hall and listened. No music. His little brother Ben tagged along. Sam listened at the door across the hall. Crunch, 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 crackle, crunch. Someone or something turned the knob. Out came Mr. Muntz, crunching a mouthful of potato chips. They waited until he was gone. There was one door left on their floor, and through it came smells of cigarettes and cooking. A family was arguing, but no music. They walked down to the floor below. A dog was barking, real mean, in apartment 9. Next door, a mother sang softly to her crying baby. At apartment 7, no sound. Down another flight, the hall light was broken. At apartment 6, there was a ball game on TV. It sounded like 1,000,000 people were in there cheering. Apartment 5, loud, juicy snoring. Ben bumped into an old, worn-out mattress. That snorer sure is enjoying his new one, Sam said. Apartment 4, more yelling. Finally, on the ground floor, the door of apartment 1 stood open. The super, Sam whispered, and they hid under the stairs. The super grumbled to himself as he left the building, and he slammed the door. That guy hates everyone, said Ben. Apartment 3 was quiet, just a container of milk outside the door. They stopped in front of apartment 2, Betsy's door. Sam thought, maybe she'll come out and I'll say hello to her. He decided to hang around. Let's rest a little, he said, and they sat on the steps. But no Betsy and no music. Come on, let's go home, said Ben. And as they turned to go upstairs, Sam noticed the container of milk was gone. He went over to take a look. The door was open a little, and he peeked in. Well? A sharp voice startled Sam. We didn't take the milk, he blurted, but the man was shouting, Okay, nosy, have a good look. Sam could make out a figure at the table. It was the blind man's apartment. Come on in, you two. What's the matter? Scared? They were so scared that they went in. There's the milk, Sam shouted. We didn't take it. Who said you did? Snapped the man. I brought it in myself. Stop shaking, kids. Shut the door and sit down. Sam shut the door and sat down. How do you know we were kids? Asked Ben. I know about you boys. You live upstairs, said the man. I know something else about you, Sam. What? Whispered Sam. You like the little girl across the hall, the way you slow down when you pass her door, the real nice way you say, Hi, Betsy, and she says, Hi, Sam, and Ben giggled. Sam jumped up. Who's nosy now? He yelled. I know about you, too. You sit around here finding out about other people's secrets. The man's face took on a faraway look. I know plenty, young fellow. I know when it rains, when it snows, what people are cooking, and what they're thinking, what they're fighting about. Secrets? You want to hear some secrets? Listen. He stood up suddenly and raised his harmonica to his mouth and began to play. He played purples and grays and rain and smoke and the sounds of night. Sam sat quietly and listened. He felt that all the sights and sounds and colors from outside had come into the room and were floating around and he floated with them. Ben's eyes were closed, and he was smiling. After a while, Sam turned to the man and said, "Would you like to take a walk with us tomorrow?" The music became so soft and quiet, they could barely hear it. Then the dark room filled with wild, happy music, and it bounced from wall to wall. Sam and Ben looked at each other. They couldn't wait for tomorrow. That's another really great book, Apartment 3 by Ezra Jack Keats. A really, really good story about when you really stop and listen and you get to know about people, you hear them with your heart. Okay, but one little thing I need to say about this story. First of all, one of the reasons I love this book is because my boys' names are Sam and Ben. And Sam was the big brother and Ben was the little brother. Well, still is the little brother. But I wanted to talk about one thing that happens in this book. I mentioned at the beginning that this book was published in 1971. That was a very long time ago. And back in 1971, people who lived in apartment buildings got to know each other. And it wasn't scary for the grown-up to say, "Come into my apartment," and then he played music for them. But we wouldn't do that today, right? So let's be really careful and just know that as much as this is a really good story, it's kind of like the pretend part in Piggybook when the dad and the boys turned into pigs. Well, that's not something that would really happen. And today, this is really something that we need to be careful about. Only go into places where you know the people who live there, and if your parents say it's okay. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the rest of Words Wednesday. Thanks so much.